Austin, the Manager of Partnership Programs for the NFCC, and your host for today's Financial Facts Chat. Thanks for joining us on Facebook and on YouTube. It's great to have you with us during this very busy season. If you enjoyed today's show, please be sure to like, comment, share with your friends, and subscribe. That helps us to demonstrate your support for nonprofit financial education, and it keeps this channel going. With the year coming to a close and the holidays kicking into high gear, we thought we would take a moment to answer some of the questions you have submitted on our Ask an Expert page at nfcc.org. We always welcome all of your personal finance questions, and we look forward to answering them, either by direct email reply, as an article on our blog, or by answering your questions here in our live chat. If you do have questions you'd like answered while watching our live stream, please enter them in the chat and we will get to them as time allows at the end of the program. To provide answers to your questions, I'm joined once again by Bruce McClary, SVP of Communications for the NFCC. So, hey, Bruce, why are you so dressed up today? I feel like I missed the memo.
Yeah, no, you didn't. There was no memo. You didn't miss that. And of course, this is truly, obviously this occasion right here. It's good to be with you. So I would want to look my best, but something coming up after this.
Very much appreciated.
I do have something coming up after this, and it's something that our viewers might be interested in as well. At noon Eastern today, America Saves is going to be having its online summit, the America Saves Summit. And the theme is building financial stability in unstable times. And I'm going to be one of the panelists talking about some of the challenges that stand in the way of people building their savings and what challenges might lie ahead in the year of 2021. This year has been especially difficult for savers. So next year, the challenges are not just going to instantly go away. So we're going to talk about some of that. We're going to talk about solutions, and we're going to provide at least a little bit of help and guidance for consumers on the issue of saving. So I'm really honored to be a part of the panel. A lot of other great organizations there. And if anybody wants to, I think there's still time to register. If anybody wants to register for that, again, it starts at noon Eastern today. You can go to americasaves.org/summit. And then you can register and you can join me and all the other panelists and the great people from America Saves who are out there promoting financial health through savings. So that's my little plug for that and the explanation for this. So that's the way it goes. But this is our first time getting back together after the holidays. So how was your Thanksgiving holiday?
It was really nice, very relaxing, and a lot less hectic and busy than previous years, a little smaller scale. How was yours?
Yeah, it was the same here. We opted for a virtual Thanksgiving, so everything was virtual except the food. And
oh, good.
and we were on Zoom, and then there was some Skype, there was some Zoom, Microsoft Teams. I feel like I went around the circuit on meeting platforms that day. But it was good. It was good. And it was great to meet with everybody. And it was great to enjoy and celebrate the holidays after such a challenging year.
Yes.
And we've got another holiday coming up. But it's good to be back. And it's good to be helping people face some of these issues and deal with some of these problems that they're having. And I understand that we have some mailbag questions for Ask an Expert.
We do. Let's get rolling. It looks like our first question is about debt collectors. So this person is asking us, what can I do if debt collectors keep calling and I can't pay them? How do I get the phone calls to stop?
Well, first of all, it's anybody going through that situation, having past due bills and having debt collectors calling and trying to reach them every day. Anybody in that situation certainly has my sympathy. It's not fun to be in that situation ever. And it's also important to point out that I used to be a debt collector years ago. So I have experience being on the other end of that. And it's no fun on that end either. Not that that's any, consolation for people getting the calls, but it's just one of those things where it's never a pleasant experience. So, I guess in this situation, there are a couple of things to keep in mind. First of all, I think it's important to point out that debt collectors have rules that they have to follow. There are rules and guidelines that debt collectors have to follow. And if they don't follow them, there are consequences. But it's very important to know the basics. And this is part of the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, which I'll talk about in a little bit at the end. But right now, your debt collectors aren't supposed to be to call you before 8 a.m. or after 9 p.m. in your area. Doesn't matter what time it is where they are. It has to be between 8 a.m. and 9 p.m. where you live. And they can't contact you while you're at work if the debt collector knows that your employer doesn't allow those types of calls to come through to you. And if they disapprove of those calls, and the debt collector can't reach you at work. They also can't lie about the nature of the call. They can't threaten you. They can't disclose the information to anybody else, account information to anybody else other than you. They can't go calling your neighbors trying to collect the debt or try to get a hold of you and disclose information. So there are other rules there as well. And it's also important that it's also important to know that your state might actually have additional rules and regulations on top of the federal regulations that the debt collectors have to follow. So those are the basics. But in your case, where you have debt collectors calling and you can't pay them, but you want the calls to stop, there are a couple of things that I would point out. First, you'll be happy to know that they have to stop if you ask them to do so in writing. And it's very important, that last piece. You have to do this. You have to make the request in writing. You can talk to them on the phone. You can ask all you want. But it's more important to have that kind of documentation that confirms you made the request for the debt collector to stop calling you. If you don't want them to contact you again, all you have to do is ask them when you're talking to them on the phone and they call you, ask them for their mailing address and then you can tell them in writing to stop calling you, to stop the phone calls. What you need to do when you send the letter is keep a copy of that letter for your records. And then when you send the original letter, send it by certified mail. That's the type of mail delivery where you have that little receipt that confirms delivery. And you'll get a return receipt that you can keep in your records that shows that, yes, the letter reached the recipient, that they received it. That's very important to keep that with the copy that you have on file. Once they get your letter, the debt collection rules, and this is all the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, stipulate that they're not allowed to contact you again once they've received that request from you. There are a couple of exceptions, though. A collector can contact you to tell you that there will be no further contact, and the debt collector can be in touch to tell you that they're going to take a specific action that they haven't taken yet. For example, taking you to court, filing a lawsuit. So you would be contacted under those circumstances after making such a request. But those are really the only two things. But another thing to keep in mind is very important here. Sending this kind of a request to the debt collector and getting them to stop calling you doesn't make the debt go away, and it doesn't alleviate you from your responsibility to pay the debt if it's something you legitimately owe. It will stop the calls. It's supposed to stop the calls, but it won't get rid of the debt. So they can still take action to collect the debt. They can still escalate the account and take you to court if that's something that's possible. So it's really important that you not forget what the consequences are if the debt continues to go unpaid. And one thing I would point out in addition to that, the stopping the calls will give you a little bit of a temporary reprieve, and it might take the stress out of the situation. But I can't emphasize this enough, that it's important to reach out and get help and talk to a financial counselor and talk to somebody who might be able to help you discover ways that you can affordably repay the debt and do it in a way that's agreeable with the debt collection agency. And a nonprofit credit counseling agency can be very helpful in that situation. So I would encourage you to go to nfcc.org, contact an NFCC member agency, talk to a counselor, let them review your financial circumstances and offer suggestions. And this is a service that's available through these nonprofit organizations. And it can at least give you, at the minimum, it can give you a better understanding of your financial circumstances and what options are available. And in addition, it's possible that it can also help you discover a way to effectively manage the repayment of the debt in a way that helps you avoid escalation of these circumstances and keep you out of further difficulty with the debt collections and even others that you owe. So it's always a helpful resource in these situations. I would strongly encourage you to reach out to an NFCC member agency and get the help you need with your debt while you're dealing with this situation. You can send a letter, you can ask for the calls to stop, but it's important to do this while you're doing that if you haven't already done so. The other thing I would point out, again, and this is all about debt collection, so it's important that you know the rules that the debt collectors are playing by. If you haven't already done so, I would suggest that you visit ftc.org. ftc.gov, not .org. That's the Federal Trade Commission. So it's ftc.gov or cfpb.gov. And both of those websites have very clear, easy to understand content that explains the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, what those rules mean, how it applies to debt collectors, and what it means for you if you're being contacted by a debt collector. And there's another reason you should check those out too. And again, it's ftc.gov or cfpb.gov. The rules are going to change next year. Not all of the debt collection rules, but some of them. It's already been announced. So the details about those changes and when they're going to go into effect are also on those websites. So it's not only important to know what's in play now, but also what's coming next year in terms of changes to the rules that govern debt collection and debt collection practices. And my guess is, for this person who asked the question, is that while this particular account is in collections, there may be other accounts that this person owes. And that's another reason why they should reach out and contact an NFCC member agency, nfcc.org, so that they can get help managing some of those accounts. And if those accounts are in jeopardy of going to a collection agency, this could be a step that helps prevent that from happening by getting the advice and guidance of a counselor. So a couple of things that you can do there. But again, sending the letter asking for the calls to stop is something that's perfectly within your right to do. If you do it the way that it was described, where you do it in writing, you have send it by certified mail, and you have some kind of confirmed receipt of delivery, and that should help you out. While I'm thinking about it, there is one thing that is sort of a wild card here. If you do ask for that, and the debt collector you're dealing with stops the calls, and this happens a lot with debts that are with collection agencies, your account could get sold to another collection agency. So it is possible that you may have to go through this exercise again if your account is sold to another collection agency. So you don't be shocked or surprised if you have to go through this situation again. Send the letter, certified mail. You know the process by that point, and you can get it taken care of. And I think the other thing too is, if it does get sold to another agency, or you get contacted by an agency that you're not familiar with, you should ask for a couple of things: debt validation and debt verification. You can request for those things in writing. They're required to provide you with that information. And that lets you know that this debt collection agency is legitimate and that they're collecting on a debt that is in your name, because there's so many scams out there that involve debt collectors where they're just people that just are calling you up out of the blue saying you owe a debt. And if they sound believable enough, in some cases, people will go ahead and send them money without checking to make sure that this debt collector is legitimate and the debt is valid and is legally collectible. So that's another thing too, if it does get sold. Then after you verify it, then if you want to go ahead and ask them to stop the calls, you can do that as a second step. So I hope that answers the question. We always appreciate those kinds of questions. And it helps me draw a little bit on my past experience, and I emphasize past, as a debt collector.
Thanks, Bruce. And I've actually got a little bit of a follow-up question on behalf of all my millennials out there. It sounds like an email is not going to suffice. You've got to send that letter in the mail. Is that right?
Yeah, I think just as a guideline, as a recommendation, this is not just my recommendation. This is what the Federal Trade Commission recommends in terms of verifying. So you do have to do it the old-fashioned way, based on the recommendation from the Federal Trade Commission. It does involve going down to the old-fashioned U.S. Post Office and getting a certified letter delivery. But those steps are worth it, because if you think about the peace of mind and verifying that they received the letter, and the fact that you're now protected and you have proof they received it in case you have an issue, or if they violate your request in some way, then you have some method of recourse, because you now have the proof that the letter was delivered. So so yeah, that's a good point that you bring up. Yeah, you can't text it, you can't send them you can't send them a message on TikTok or whatever. It's got to be whatever that message would look like. I don't know, but it's got to be certified delivery.
Got it. Thanks, Bruce. All right, let's move on to our second question here. Is there a way to get a lump sum payment on a debt that I'm owed when the original agreement allows monthly installment payments and is being paid as agreed? This person continues by mentioning that they desperately need the money to avoid filing bankruptcy.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm sorry about the circumstances that led to this situation and the request, the question that the person is asking. It's I can't even imagine the urgency here if they're trying to change an agreement where they're the lender and they're being repaid by someone else and they need the money faster. That can be a sticky situation. I think one of the things that I want to point out here, first of all, I'm not a lawyer. So if this is a legally binding contract, my first and best advice would be to seek counsel and talk to an attorney who specializes in contract law and see what they might advise here. But with that in mind, I think there's a couple of approaches that you have here. One of them is a direct approach that involves the contract itself, and another might be looking for alternatives. So let's talk about the contract itself. If it is, again, if it is a legally binding contract, I revert back to my advice that I gave just a minute ago, but it's probably going to require some kind of renegotiation between all parties involved. And it needs to be more than just an informal handshake. You need to make sure that you have some kind of documentation that this other person, the debtor, is agreeing to the new terms and that they'll go ahead and comply, and then they can pay you. Anytime you do it as a handshake or something informal off to the side, if there is a legally binding contract that it contradicts, then you are making yourself vulnerable to some kind of legal dispute or legal action later. Potentially, you're making yourself vulnerable to that. And that's a position you don't want to be in. That can make a bad situation even worse. And it doesn't give you much runway to collect on the debt based on the new terms if it's just a handshake. So unfortunately, I can't tell you whether or not that's going to work. That's just a meeting of all parties and trying to come to an understanding and agreement to change the terms, and everybody has to be willing to accept what those new terms are going to be. But the other thing is, in lieu of that, you might want to consider alternatives to doing this to try to find some of the money that you need in the short term. And that's probably not an easy task either, because you wouldn't be asking this question if you felt that you had enough room in your budget or areas where you could cut to free up the kind of money that you need to avoid filing bankruptcy. So but it does deserve a second look. If you've looked at it on your own and you can't seem to find some areas in your budget that you can free up, maybe you want to turn to somebody else who can help provide a different perspective. Look at your budget from the outside and come up with some other alternatives. So it's always good to get a professional opinion from somebody who is a financial expert, who can take a look at your budget, who can take a look at your debts, and see if there's some way to free up the money you need so that you can avoid that specific outcome that you mentioned. You said that in the question that you're considering bankruptcy, which is a pretty, that's a pretty big step to take. And it is a step that has consequences. And it is also a step that once taken can't be reversed. You can't back out of that. There's a lot of finality associated with bankruptcy. So you always want to be sure that that's the right thing for you when you make that decision. So I would also suggest, just as I did for the person asking the question before, certainly think about the renegotiation of the contract, and certainly think about maybe revisiting your budget on your own, but also get some help from somebody else, a financial professional. And you can talk to a nonprofit credit counseling agency by going to nfcc.org. You can have a counseling session where they will review your entire financial circumstances. They'll talk to you about your debts, about your income, your assets, your liabilities, and then they'll put together an action plan that includes alternatives for you to consider. Bankruptcy may not be the only option that you have. And that's one thing I like to repeat a lot, because oftentimes people consider, when they're in financial trouble, that bankruptcy is the next best step that they could take for themselves. Just because it's available doesn't mean it's the best choice. And there may be other choices and options that you have that are better for your short-term needs and your long-term financial health. And that's important too, because you have to think about both things. There's a different track for people who go through bankruptcy as opposed to people who choose other options. And it's all about what happens afterwards. That's really important. I think that's missed sometimes, because you want to know how quickly can you recover from whatever option you choose. How do you improve your finances over time and restore your credit rating and get back on track and get control of the debt that you owe. So the solution that's available through bankruptcy may not always be best for some people. So keep that in mind. Reach out and get help. Talk to somebody, get some advice, but certainly think about the contract renegotiation step as a short-term solution as well. And all the best of luck to you in that process and renegotiating that contract. I sincerely hope that does work, but it's always good to explore some of those other options in case it doesn't.
Well, thanks, Bruce. Let's move on to our third question here. This person writes, I have a small balance charge-off that's negatively influencing my credit score. I haven't received a bill in years, and the account originally went unpaid and after late 2017. Should I attempt to write a goodwill adjustment letter? And if you could, in your answer, explain for our listeners' benefit and also for my benefit what a goodwill adjustment letter is, that would be great.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And this gives me an opportunity to talk about something that we don't often address when we're talking about people experiencing situations where there's information on their credit report, negative information on their credit report that is valid, yet is something that people would like to see go away. And that really is the difference here. So this person is talking about a charge-off that is negatively influencing their credit score. They're not disputing the validity of this account. Nowhere in this is there a dispute of this account. So they're agreeing. They're basically saying, yeah, I know I owe this, but it's really messing things up. And I'd like to get it off, find a way to get it off of my credit so that my score can go up and it can recover, et cetera. And this is, there's so many things really to unpack in the answer to this question. I know we're coming up on time here, so I'll try to be quick and try to be brief. But first of all, there are things that you can do directly at no cost to try to accomplish what you're asking about here. And I would sincerely encourage anyone not to jump into the hands of a credit repair company for this exercise, because a credit repair company is going to likely charge you a fee. And there's no guarantee of the outcome. So basically then what you're paying for is a 50-50 chance, even at best, in getting the results that you're looking for. So it's better to follow the steps that I'm going to talk about and do it yourself and not pay anything for this to see if it can get done. So your question, your follow-up question, Rachel, was about what is a goodwill adjustment letter. Well, essentially that letter asks it's asking your creditor, the person that's reporting the information to the credit bureaus, the people that you owe, you're asking them to remove a legitimate negative mark from your credit reports. Because the credit reports, they get information from the creditors that you owe. So it's the creditor you owe that has to contact the credit bureau and submit the information. And if they're going to comply with your request, they would just ask the credit bureau to remove the account or change the status of the account so it's reporting differently in a way that would positively impact your credit. Now, it's a request, and you're really appealing to their good nature. So there's no guarantee that they're going to even consider your request. They just have to show a little bit of mercy, and that's basically what you're asking for. So again, you're not disputing the legitimacy of the account. This isn't a dispute letter. This is just you're appealing to the good nature of the creditor and asking them to remove this account completely. And usually this works best, when it does work at all, when you have a very small balance, a balance that's under $100, something like $40 or $50. This would be a situation where you might have a better shot at getting the creditor to agree. So what do you include in that letter? You list the account number and the address. You briefly explain the situation that caused the error. You explain the steps that you took to correct the issue, and you talk about how it might not happen again, and then you mention how it's negatively affecting you. If there's if you're trying to apply for a mortgage refinance, or if you're trying to get approved for an auto loan, all of those things. Something like this could get in the way of, and then you just appeal to their good nature and ask to have it removed. So that is, again, it's just a question. It's just a request. They may or may not comply, but I would also encourage you to do this the same way that I encourage people to write the letter to the debt collectors to stop the calls. Do it in a way you can verify the letter was sent. Send it by mail, send it certified mail, so you know when they received it, that they have the letter, and you could even follow up with a phone call and have a discussion with them. I think the more you do there, the more you're proactive. It's probably going to improve your chances here.
Great, that's good to know. All right, I'm not seeing any other questions at this time, so I think we can go ahead and wrap up. But thank you so much, Bruce, for this. I think this was really informative. I certainly learned a lot. I would like to thank everyone who joined us today. We hope that this Financial Facts Chat helps you make some wise financial decisions. If you are watching after the live stream, don't forget to like, comment, and share. And we'll